Hello, everybody, and welcome back to your favorite X-Men. Although there's a bit of a twist on what we're doing here today, because this is a favorite X-Men dun 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 villain episode. I am joined again by Alex, who does fantastic artwork and always has some of the best X-Men opinions. And if you've been around here, you'll recognize them from the Jean Grey episode we did here, which has been one of my favorite conversations, by the way. So I'm really excited to talk about another great character with you today, Alex.
Another redhead, I guess. My type.
I almost felt the need to question whether or not she's a redhead because we see her in so many different forms and variations all the time.
She can be whatever she wants.
Yeah, and now one, it's probably already super obvious for someone to figure out who we're talking about. And really, two, anybody clicking on this video or listening, it's also probably already obvious to them. But for the purposes of being theatrical, do you want to do the honors and introduce to us which character we'll be talking about today?
Yeah, well, today I'll do the same thing I did last time. Drum roll. We're talking about Mystique, or her many other names. I was gonna try to list all of her secret aliases, but there's too many to list.
Does she have a lot?
I think so.
I mean, maybe I'm Mystique illiterate, but I only thought it was like her name, Raven Darkholme, and then just, Mystique.
Raven
But
Darkholme.
maybe there are others.
Leni Zauber. I don't know. It's something strange, but that's the alias she went by when she tricked Sabretooth.
Oh.
And she pretended to be a young mutant named Fox.
Well, wait, because she's complicated, because at some point it transcends being an alias and is just like another identity she's taken on.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know, everybody, Mystique is a shapeshifter. She is a shape-shifting baddie, might I add, known for being maybe a bit of a radical, for wanting and then subsequently getting her wife back, and is also kind of known for kind of being a bad mother. What do you think, Alex? Do you think I'm missing anything there in regards to like the core Mystique issues?
No, I think that hits all the points. She loves her wife. She's got a complicated relationship with her children, and she's just doing whatever she wants.
Although I feel like the whatever she wants is always kind of, or what she thinks is the best for the mutant kind and what is in the interest of mutant kind. And that's kind of why I really appreciate Mystique, honestly. She has like the ability to literally be anyone. She could have passively blended into the background and just lived a simple life as like a normal human. But instead, she was like, no, I'm going to use my powers to become this awesome mutant radical who's just going to take down bigots for years, pretty much.
Yeah, it's amazing that this character is, at first glance, like when she first appears in Miss Marvel, you're like, oh, this is just some evil blue lady. But she's a lot more, like, with a lot of ex-villains, it's a lot more nuanced in that. She has a lot of, not to just say her name, but she's got a lot of mystique.
Well, it's appropriate.
I know, so much mystery to her that I think keeps her intriguing throughout any story she's in, because there's still so much about her that we don't know. Like, when was she born? How old is she really? Like, when she was with Irene, like, was she actually the same age as Irene? Or like, there's so much going on.
Yeah, and not to be overly cynical about other characters, but that's something I really appreciate about Mystique. Like, as opposed to, for example, Wolverine, where first he was kind of the man of mystery, and then everyone just sort of started fleshing out their own section of Wolverine history and lore. But I really like that, like, yeah, it's happened a bit for Mystique, I guess. She's had bits of that, but most of it is widely unknown, and like the timeline of her existence is kind of up in the air. And yeah, her family tree is like messy in its own unique way, I guess.
Yeah.
But we still don't actually know that much about it.
And I think that's what, unlike Wolverine, which I feel like he ends up hitting the same beats in a lot of his stories about his past, Mystique, there's just something that could beat every Wolverine storyline, because she has like millions of romances, millions of children, millions of like evil things, sometimes good things that she's done. But and I like that some writers, when they get the chance to just fully focus on her, don't go completely for it into revealing everything, because I feel like that would defeat the purpose of her character, to reveal everything about her. I like that we only get bits and pieces of who she is, because it again keeps her interesting. And I think that's to a fault of Wolverine, is that we've revealed most that we can about him. So he's not as interesting as he was.
And it's interesting in a way, and maybe it's because at a time Wolverine was like that, and he was a cool, smoking cigar, cutting guys up character. But it's funny that in like the cultural lexicon of people outside of comic books and what they actually know about the X-Men is basically just Wolverine. And I like Wolverine. I think he's a good character. I think he's fun. But personally, I know there are tons of X-Men characters that other people like a lot more and I think are a lot more interesting. And there's a lot of characters that I think are more interesting too. So it's just kind of funny that Wolverine is the one that
Yeah.
just everybody seems to know all
Yeah,
about.
it sucks that he sort of got pushed as much as he did because he could still be that super mysterious character, but in becoming the most popular character of the franchise, he had to be pushed into being the main character, which for Wolverine, for me personally, I don't think he is a main character. I feel like he doesn't really work in that realm very well, and unless you're keeping the mystery, like with Mystique, like in reading her solo, I was worried that it was going to reveal a lot about her, but we ended up not learning a whole bunch about her through what I've read.
Yeah, it's cool. I feel like all of the Mystique stories that I read don't really tread on the past of Mystique, but are more focused on paving the future for her, or like exploring her morality and how she rationalizes things like that, and kind of just like her place in the world, which is super appreciated, honestly, because it would be so easy to just be like, this is the intricate past of Mystique, and here's all these retcons that we're going to do. But it's kind of nice for all the writers that they don't do that, because then people don't get caught navigating this web of everything that's been established with her ever.
Yeah. In the solo, I was like, she only mentions like her father one time, I think. I was like, oh, this is like the first time I've ever think I've read something where Mystique mentioned any part of her family. It was just weird. This is another thing, like, I thought while reading, Brian K. Vaughan sort of characterized her in a way I feel like I never really looked at her. She's kind of more like snappy and pop culture referencey, but I think that's just Brian K. Vaughan's writing style. In the same way, like, if you're reading Joss Whedon's writing, because he'll do the same thing. Like, it's that same sort of reference. Like, I guess Mystique's favorite writer is Oscar Wilde. Like, who knew?
Yeah, they mention that so often. It's really funny.
I know. I was like, honestly, like, I kind of like this, like, little fun fact for Mystique that I'm just gonna like throw in people's faces now.
It's like the Mystique trivia knowledge that you can flex on any X-Men fan now. It's like the equivalent of when someone's wearing a band shirt and you're like, name all their songs. If someone says they like Mystique, you can be like, oh, really?
Who's your favorite writer?
Yeah. I will also add that we did this today in a different way than we normally do it, and that is instead of having a specific designated array of storylines that we read, I think we each just did our own thing and are pulling off our own Mystique knowledge, which will hopefully be somewhat complimentary. But we did both read Brian K. Vaughan's 2004 Mystique series, which was very obviously and aggressively from 2004.
Yeah, I didn't think about
I
that.
liked it.
Especially the art in like the first arc was very like, oh, this is early 2000s art.
Yeah.
Just like sort of like edgy for the sake of being edgy.
Yeah, even the covers too. Although I guess they were kind of trying to play actually into the spy thriller thing.
Yeah, which I think worked for Mystique. I think I never really thought of her as like espionage sort of character, but I feel like that angle really works well for her. She can be anybody and sneak into places.
It really was a super powered spy thriller, that series. I thought it was stereotypical in a few ways, but that doesn't equivocate to it being bad because I still really enjoyed it and thought it was like an awesome, fast paced read. But it was funny because as I was working through it in my head, it felt like the X-Men James Bond in a way. And I'm not someone
Yeah,
who's like big into spy thrillers or super well versed in that type of film, but you could see the characters fitting molds from those movies. Like Charles Xavier was the man behind it all and in charge. Forge was the guy creating like wacky Kingsman style gadgets for her espionage
yeah.
usage. Then I forget what was the tiny guy's name, Short Stack?
Short pack.
Yeah, he was, I guess, like the actual man in the chair type.
Yes.
Which, by the way, have you seen Shortpack in like anything else, or is he just like is he from this series only?
He's from the series. I looked up his Wikipedia. I was like, I wonder if he's appeared in anything else. It's practically only this series. I think maybe like a minor appearance somewhere, but I think most of his appearances are from the series.
He was so interesting to me because for those who don't, oh, well, probably a lot of people probably don't know him unless you've read this, But Shortpack is just a tiny mutant, and by tiny, I mean he's basically the size of an action figure, and they kind of subvert your expectations because they make you think he's going to be someone who can grow bigger or smaller, but no, he's just that size.
Yeah, he's just a tiny little telepath guy.
Right.
Like,
I don't know. It's weird but appreciated, I guess. I like all the random mutants they threw in there. Like, who is the one that she goes against in this series who's the villain, air quotes, who's empathetic towards viruses and can speak to them?
oh yeah, the host. It's just simply the host.
Has she
And
shown up in anything else?
I she's in like a Wolverine series, I think, after the Mystique. She shows up, but I've never read it, so I don't know.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I was like, these are cool mutants that I've not seen before.
I know. And like fun powers too. I liked that it could have just been like she has. At first, I thought she just like if she breathed on people, she had control of them or something. But no, she just speaks to viruses, which is so weird, so random. But I kind of loved how weird it was.
Yeah, and like the more specific a mutant's power is, the more satisfying it is to me, at least.
I also thought it used Mystique's powers in cool ways. I like that it sort of tried to explain how they work in a way. Like when she is going to I can't remember what she's doing. I think she's like it's before she ends up meeting the host or whatever. But she's pretending to be this guy and she's talking to this woman and she's like, "Oh my gosh, what's wrong with your voice?" And she's like, "Oh, I can only mimic a person's voice if I've heard them say 10 syllables." I was like, oh, that's such an interesting
That was so cool.
like because you would think Mystique could just do it, like she could just look at someone and figure out their voice or something, but it's I like that there was an explanation for how she did it,
Hmm.
and also a weird explanation that her clothes are her skin and she's naked all the time, which I guess is why in the movies they make her naked, but
They totally did a lot of really cool power stuff in that series with her that made me kind of rethink how powerful Mystique is. And I already knew she was powerful with her base mutant shapeshifting. Like, I think that is already really powerful. But she did things like there's a moment where she takes an iron pipe. And since she's holding it, it like metamorphosizes with
Mhm.
her and she turns it into gold and gives it to someone. Like, that's really powerful. That's almost another thing aside from shapeshifting.
Yeah, like in she I think she said like maybe this was something else I was reading. She's like said that her like thing works on a cellular level. So like whatever she's doing changes her cells. Like it's just interesting. Like the science behind it. I'm not super big on science, but like to think that there's a bunch of science behind how her powers work is like super interesting.
It's always cool to get like little details about how our favorite mutants like operate, like kind of what you said with like the 10 syllable thing. Like that's cool.
Yeah, and there's that moment where they're getting those mutant children out of that testing facility or whatever, and she like makes two heads on herself and like has four arms, and she's like, I've only done this once, and like it's like splitting my brain apart. And I'm like, you would think like it wouldn't like she could just fix it, but it's interesting that like her body inside is like the same or something.
They really did do a lot of cool Mystique fleshing out stuff in that book that I don't know if it like existed elsewhere before, but like another one, for example, was I didn't know Charles Xavier couldn't read Mystique's mind because of her shifting gray matter in her brain or something.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. I thought that was really cool too. It's just I think they did such a good job. Like going into it, I feel like for some reason I had the idea that people didn't really like this series, but it really exceeded my expectations for what it did with her.
I mean, yeah, they did a pretty phenomenal job, like you said. And narrative aside, all this power information stuff that we're talking about was really great to have. And it kind of paved a path, I think, for writers in the future to see how far they can push Mystique's powers. I mean, like what we were just talking about with like her turning something she's holding into gold. Like, how far does that extend? Like,
Yeah.
can she do a Kitty Pride situation where, like, when Kitty is holding someone, she can have them phase with her? If Mystique is touching or holding onto someone, can she also alter their matter as well then? Like, I don't know. Has that been explored? Has she even attempted that before?
Yeah. It would be interesting to see them bring it up again. I feel like that might be like why Mr. Sinister like wants to hang out with her all the time or something because she's like just such a like DNA and cell marvel or whatever. Like she can be just like changing and stuff, and he's into I don't know clones and stuff.
Yeah, well, like clones and eugenics and the works. It's funny though because, and you kind of mentioned this earlier, but I had never really encountered this thought process while reading comics until I got wrapped into X-Men and all their stories. But honestly, like a lot of times when it's not bigots and it's actually just mutant radicals that are the villains, I tend to empathize with them a bit, you know? And not that that's like a unilateral thing, and that's not to say that makes any of them a paragon of morality or
Hmm.
anything like that, but usually boiled down to the bare bones, it's almost always just oppressed using their power and fighting against their oppressors. Like when your life and the lives of the ones you care for are being threatened so aggressively and so consistently, I kind of totally understand the idea of like taking strives for more rapid social change. And I'm kind of like, yeah, you go. Like, break down that social structure, topple that political hierarchy, which I think is why myself and a lot of people find the Krakoa era so satisfying. Like, it feels like doing that in the least aggressor and like the least violent way possible.
Yeah, it's like the culmination of everything to that point. Like they've done the terrorist quote unquote stuff. Now it's time for them to like move forward.
Yeah, and a lot of the Mystique stuff from the Claremont era is, well, actually, I don't know if my timeline is exactly correct or if I have all the details here, but so does she take over the Brotherhood of
Yeah.
Evil Mutants, or does she start like a new sect of it,
Yeah,
or
it's the first time it appears is in the Days of Future Past storyline. I think that's the first time we ever see her leading this Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. So I think that's the only time that it's ever like said that this is her Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, as far as I know.
what I was kind of trying to get to was that I don't know, I guess, what the connective tissue is that is like the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants to Freedom Force, which is, for those who don't know, like the government sanctioned mutant group.
Well, so Val Cooper, who is a liaison to the government or whatever, Mystique sort of traps her in her own home and shifts into her, and she's like, "Hey, it's me, it's me, Mystique." And at the time, Val Cooper is working for Ronald Reagan because this is way back when. And she turns into Ronald Reagan. She's like, "Listen, I'm tired of mutants just like being overlooked, and I think it's time that we work together. You know, like an eye for an eye. Like I do this for you and we get pardoned or whatever." Like, so she basically starts Freedom Force herself. Like, it's,
So yeah, I just assumed she kind of got blocked into a deal or something, but I guess for someone who is as conniving and planny as Mystique, I really shouldn't have just automatically assumed that.
she always works out a way where it works out for her in the
Yeah, and I
end.
kind of wanted to ask you about that too, because I think, like, historically, there has been this trope of, like, a seductress, a woman who has some agenda of her own, who's using her sexuality or something to entrap or trick or, like, elicit information out of someone. And it seems like Mystique is sort of like a femme fatale based around that idea. Basically, metaphorically, and actually, physically, she kind of falls into, like, the trappings of a two faced character. And I'm curious if you had any thoughts on that, or how maybe that role plays into the X-Men in like a greater narrative sense,
Hmm.
or how she might in ways subvert from that role, or maybe my reading is just like totally off with that too. That is also completely a possibility.
No, I think like that is the baseline of her character, is that she is this femme fatale. I think Mystique in French is like the female mystery or something.
Oh.
So she is this feminine evil, and I think like Magneto, who in the beginning was just this evil guy, subverts it, and you end up caring about her in a way. I mean, she's completely narcissistic and sociopathic, but still her thought processes and her morals end up making sense in a way. And I think there's a great line in the Mystique solo. I think it's in issue 13 when that random guy who's working for the Quiet Man or whatever is like, "You only help people you see yourself in." And I think that is a lot of Mystique's character, is that she really feels bad. She loves Rogue only because she sees herself, and no, she sees Irene in Rogue, but she hates Nightcrawler because she sees herself in Nightcrawler. And she is just sort of, it's hard like to explain her morals because they make sense, but also they don't at all.
That one makes me feel very sad for my boy Nightcrawler, and two, I think you're definitely onto it there because even in the solo series, there's a time where Her and Forge like often get into these ideological debates in that series, which are super entertaining, by the way. But I think
Yeah,
Mystique at one point says like, my morality is perfect. I cannot be a better version of myself because my morality is already the best it can be, which is like you've said, like narcissism and just
yes.
insane arrogance.
She is a narcissist and in the and sociopathic, like she and then when but in like such like a self-hating way to the point like Forge points out like, well, you can't look at yourself in the mirror. Like you're so confident, but you can't look at yourself in
Yeah,
the
which I'd
mirror.
never heard about before, and maybe it's just that like Forge knows her more intimately, so he knew that. But also, I was confused because like 2 issues later, and I don't know why she had like a mindset perspective switch, but 2 issues later, she like looks. It ends with a splash page of her looking in her reflection and like smiling, and I'm just like, I didn't understand narratively how we got there, you know?
Yeah, maybe it was just that guy pointing out that she only helps people who she sees herself in, and then Forge exposing her for kind of being self-hating. She was like, okay, maybe I'm not so bad. Or something. I don't know. Who knows Mystique's thought process, to be honest. She, well, in the series, she's pretending to be a student at Xavier's. She tries to sleep with Gambit. She's like, oh, for not sleeping with my daughter, I'll turn into her and you can sleep with me. It's like, what? Like, this is how Mystique thinks. Like, she's like, this is a reward. Exactly.
Oh my god.
It's like, no wonder Rogue doesn't want to be involved with you sometimes.
See, this is the toxic motherhood side of Mystique. But also, I need to create like when you're hunting down a serial killer, as one does, and you have like the string, and you've got all the corkboard stuff going on. So you've got all the connections of everyone who may be involved. I need that, but like for X-Men who have slept with each other or who have tried to sleep with each other, because I think it would be equally as crazy.
Mystique, she gets around too. Pretty sure her and Wolverine have slept together. Her and Forge. Her in like half the Marvel universe, probably. Let's be honest.
Yeah, her and Wolverine did sleep together, and it's a weird one too because it's in one of those series that like explores Wolverine's past before Weapon X. So they actually met each other and like got together before Wolverine was actually Wolverine, and it's just like one of those weird moments where like a character meets someone before they actually are supposed to meet them type thing, and kind of didn't work, I think, but it is whatever, I guess.
And it's also weird to think like she's married to Irene at that time, also. So it's like she cheating on Destiny, which doesn't make sense because she would kill for Destiny.
Yeah, see, I really gotta ignore that because honestly, Mystique and Destiny, and most of my reading of them has been in the Hickman era,
Hmm.
but also a bit of when they were on the Freedom Force together with the Claremont run. Although that stuff was more, and I have heard editorially at the time, and this needs to be fact checked 100% because I cannot recall where I got this information from or where I heard it, so a grain of salt here. But what I heard was Claremont wanted those characters, Destiny and Mystique, to be way more open and explicitly gay, but editorially at the time, that wasn't allowed because the comics code, I know for a
Hmm.
fact, didn't allow that, and the editor at the time
Jim
also
Shooter, I
didn't.
think.
Yeah, Jim Shooter, that's what I heard as well. He didn't want to sort of push against the limitations that the comic code I guess had set, and I guess that's also just kind of another nuanced conversation. But it was always funny to me how queer coded those issues were because Mystique would be talking to Freedom Force, and she'd be like, "You all are so useless, like you don't do anything right," and then she'd turn to Destiny, and she'd be like, "Except you, I feel interesting draw and a connection with you that goes beyond like any of these."
It's like it's kind of like in a way Claremont just ignored that. It was like, no, they're together. Like it's I was reading stuff like right before this where it's just like I was reading the issue Destiny Dies, and it's just so clear like these two are together. Like there's no other, and I know there's probably comics bros that are like, what? Like Mystique is gay, not my Mystique or whatever. It's like read a comic, babe, because it's there.
Yeah, really. And it's been there too, is the thing. And I don't know, it's always funny when I see, and this is a bit off the path here, but it's about comics in general, and I feel like it's important. But I feel like I'm on the positive side of X Twitter, and I'm sure you are too, because that's kind of how we connected in the first place. But my feed is, at least I can say, very positive. But every once in a while, I see people responding to the negative side of fandoms and I end up on a different side of comic Twitter where people are whining about how all the worst X-Men stories are the ones that have anything to do with like political issues or social activism, or they'll be ragging on the modern stories for having gay characters and really just characters of all backgrounds and demographics and whatnot. And it's just like, guys, how are you also the type of people that are uplifting the classic Claremont stuff, but you fail to see how even that stuff is like super progressive for its time? Like, I just don't know. I don't understand how your media literacy fails you so hard and allows you to completely gloss over these subjects in your books. And this is something that I even find like a little frustrating, especially coming from the X-Men fandom, like people who are X-Men fans but so obviously miss the point.
Exactly. It's all there. Like you can't write an X-Men story without it being political in some way. That's just not possible. It's not possible to write Mystique and not think about the like gender and sexuality and stuff that goes into her character. And like that's always going to be a part of Mystique, and the politics are always going to be a part of the X-Men. Like when Iceman came out, people were like, I can't believe they just made him gay. It's like, well, if you look back, he's never really been straight either. So
Yeah, and you've probably seen it discussed before, or seen the panel before, but like in the and it probably wasn't intentional way back then, but in the original like '60s X-Men series, there's even that funny moment when like Jean Grey is coming to the school for the first time, and all the boys are looking out the window, and they're like, "Oh my God, it's a girl! Oh, hubba hubba!" And Iceman's just in the back, and he's the only one that's like, "Oh, who cares about a girl? Who cares about
exactly.
girls? Blah blah blah." And it's like, oh, little do you know, my dude.
And he had a brief relationship with Mystique. And spoiler, dating Mystique is gay. I don't. I hate to tell anybody that, but dating any ex woman is gay in itself. To be honest.
That's also really funny though, because there you go. That's another character duo I would have never imagined. That's another one for my yarn board. It is Mystique and Iceman. Like, what a weird combo.
They try them all. I mean,
Yeah, I guess everyone's just been of everyone in the X-Men books. And look, while we're on the subject of hot takes, I have not seen most of the X-Men movies, okay? And nobody take what I'm about to say too seriously because I really am just speaking on something I have not seen a lot of. But I'm going to say the X-Men movies are misogynistic. And look, the only reason I say this is because, from what I've seen, they've done some of the greatest female characters dirty. Like, for example, I watched one of the X-Men movies just for Emma Frost because I love Emma
oh,
Frost. I wanted to see her on the big
first
screen.
class. That is just not Emma.
They basically just reduced her to Shaw's lapdog, which was very insulting for Emma. And I feel like they do that with Mystique too in another one or another couple that I've seen because it seemed like Mystique was kind of just Magneto's lapdog too. So it's like stop producing these great characters just as like little lapdogs for the other characters.
Yeah.
But I don't know, Alex. What do you think of my hot take? I know it's kind of crazy and I'm making it based on nothing really, but
You're not far off. I think they get well the first three at least. I think get Mystique right for the most part. Besides the making her Mystique and not Mystique, Magneto's lapdog, which is just like I think kind of that hindered her character because I feel like in a lot of other media I've seen, they also just make Mystique her Magneto's like right hand man, which she's never really been. Like she's kind of her own person. She works for herself. She doesn't work for anybody else. And a lot those movies just are not nice to the female characters when the female characters, hot take, are the heart of the X-Men. I
yeah, I feel like that's not even controversial, to be honest. I feel like unequivocally, the female X-Men characters are just kind of a lot more interesting in like power design, like the extension of the metaphor. They're more interesting than their male counterparts. And the male counterparts are great too, but it's just that goes to show how really fantastic X-Men handles their
Mhm.
female characters.
There's a reason why when Claremont took over, Storm became the main character. Like she was just more interesting than everyone else. Like he always took more. Claremont always took more interest in the female characters, anyways. Like you can tell, like in the Outback era, like nobody, mostly the female character. It's a mostly female led team. Like and Havoc's there, and why I feel like not Claremont, Morrison's X-Men is really good is because it lets female characters be great and it's not like forcing Wolverine and Cyclops into the narrative. Like that is mostly like Emma and Jean's book, to be honest. Like
Yeah, and that's why, because that was the first X-Men book I ever read. And that's why I fell in love with Emma Frost as a character and then also Jean Grey.
yeah, I think it's the first one I ever read too, and why I was like, okay, I need to read more. Like,
And whenever the X books allow their female characters to be in the foreground, I think it just always works really, really well and is always a satisfying read.
yeah, and I feel like that's why this Mystique solo book is good. Like, I feel like they try to give solo books to the male side characters so often. Like, I know a lot of people like Cable, but like, I don't get the appeal of Cable. Like, he's a '90s boys character. He's for the boys.
Cable is for the boys, and like honestly, I don't like Cable either, really. And whenever I think about him, whenever I see him, I'm just like, I just think like this character was created just to sell toys. Like
Yeah,
he's just a big dude with a bunch of guns, and they wanted to make cool action figures. But hey, maybe a Cable fan will come on the podcast and change my mind because I haven't read that much Cable stuff. So I'm willing to love Cable, but someone's got to convince me. Someone's got to show me the ropes.
yeah. I just think of the Liefeld art, and I'm like, I don't want to see this character. But bringing it back to Mystique, the one story I like Cable in is Messiah Complex, which is a big story for Mystique, and it takes place pretty quick. Is it after M Day? It's a little bit after M Day.
Yeah, it's after M Day.
And Cable has stolen the first baby to be born after M Day, and hilarity ensues. I liked that. And then Mystique steals the baby and is like, okay, Rogue is like kind of in a coma right now, so I'm just gonna touch the baby to her and maybe it'll help.
Yeah, this was early on in my X-Men reading, but yeah, I remember Rogue being like mad at Mystique about that or something with the baby.
Yeah, like when Rogue wakes up, she's like, "What did you do? Like, why would you do this? I didn't want this, Mama. Why would you do this to me?" And she's like, "I did it for you." And then she slaps her, and it's it's a fun scene.
Yeah, I guess like in her own way, that shows Mystique's own sense of like maternal instinct and how that
Yeah,
is like intertwined with, I guess, kind of her selfishness because she does kind of try to sacrifice that baby for Rogue, which is like, oh, save my daughter, but also kill a baby type thing. So, yeah. By the way, have Mystique and Rogue like even spoken at all during the Krakoa era?
I don't think they've interacted on panel at all this era, as far as I know. I know Hickman said that he had to cut a scene where it was going to be Rogue who brought Destiny back using like Emma's powers or whatever, which I
Oh,
wish.
that would have been so cool.
Yeah, I he tweeted about it, and I was like, oh, if we didn't have Inferno didn't happen like prematurely, like we could have gotten that, and that I feel like that would have worked so much better than what we got. I'm not saying Inferno is a bad story. I just feel like in some ways it was disappointing to what it could have been.
I think you and I talked about this on Twitter, and the point we kind of got to was that Inferno seemed like it was going to be another story in Krakoa that set up like a kind of radical status quo shift, but then everything on the surface level seemed the same after the story, and like I guess there's the Moira change, but mostly no big difference, so that was kind of the
Yeah,
disappointment. It was really good in its own unique ways, though.
I think like the biggest change is like Moira leaving and Colossus joining the Quiet Council, which like I'm sorry, why Colossus of all people? I know it has something to do with X Force, but I don't read that book anymore.
I'm in the exact same boat as you because I was also not reading X Force at the time because I also dropped it. So I didn't even know what was going on with Colossus. And like people were saying he was possessed or something on X Twitter or something. And I was like, oh, how's that going to factor in? But then he also didn't do anything in Inferno after that anyway. And there were like no other votes cast in that series that, had any type of effect.
No, it amounted to nothing. They're like, we need someone on our side. And they bring in Colossus who does nothing the whole time. I feel like that's just like remnants of like what Inferno was going to originally be.
Oh, but what I was going to say earlier before I got distracted and off topic and lost in X-Men thoughts as I usually do,
Mhm.
but when I was talking about Destiny and Mystique stuff that I've read, I was saying I mostly read Hickman, and based on all my readings, they're honestly one of my favorite couples in media, Destiny and Mystique. Like, just something about them really speaks to me, and it's possible it's the romantic in me maybe that appreciates their unique bond, and I really like to see how far Mystique is willing to go to get Destiny back, and everything she's willing to sacrifice in the game, the dance she's willing to do it. It's all so wonderful, and just them being back together, like that part in Inferno with the pros of week 1 to week 3 of her being back and them being a couple again, I thought was exceptionally touching. Like just relearning to love the person who'd been gone so long, because for Mystique, it'd been years, but for Destiny, there was no time gap because she was just resurrected. So Destiny was originally a little off-put about how bitter and cynical Mystique had grown over the years, but they do reconcile over the coming weeks, and that is just like such a beautiful testament to their love that I really, really enjoyed. It was just like 2 pages, but
And
I
it
thought it
just,
was done so well.
like a lot of things Mystique does, it's her showing radical love to go to these such lengths for this woman. And it's crazy to me that Mystique had never called Destiny her wife until that panel in Hickman's X-Men. That's insane to me that these characters, like, they're so obviously together, but that was the first time it's ever been explicitly said. And that's insane.
Yeah, I didn't actually realize that was the first time, but that panel is instantly iconic. So yeah, that's insane that that is like the first time it was brought up like that.
And now that they're together and like can explicitly be together, it's just like, I know we still have there's still a million ways for comics diversity to go. Like there's a long road ahead,
Yeah.
but we need to celebrate this win. Like people who are crying for diversity, and I agree there needs to be a lot more,
Hmm.
but like we need to celebrate our wins when we can. Like this is amazing that we have these 2 female characters together and they're married and they're have this entire, like the entire line basically hinges on them. Like that's crazy.
Totally agree, and it's great that they are key players, and it wasn't like the writers were just like, okay, here's your gay couple, and then they just tossed them in the background. No, Mystique and Destiny are major players. I mean, Inferno is really just about them. It is a major X-Men event about this gay couple.
It could have just been Mystique. It could have just been called Mystique and Destiny, the miniseries. Like,
Yeah, could have.
like it was great for them.
And even just apart from the actual narrative, just like the character dynamic between those two, I think has been so fun. They're kind of like catty to everyone but each other, and it's amazing. And one of my new favorite X-Men happenings is Destiny just effortlessly roasting and dismantling someone, and then we get a panel shot of Destiny's helmet, and in the reflection of her helmet, we get to see the reaction of the person she just destroyed. It's like
Yes.
happened a handful of times now, and it always makes me laugh. It's so good.
It's so great in Inferno when they're going to meet Emma and the Cuckoos are like, "What are you doing here?" And Destiny is just like, like just reads their entire like terrible future to them. It's like, and they're like, "Wait, which one of us?" And she's like, "Oh, I thought you all were the same. That's interesting. Well,
Yeah.
see you later."
It is like this perfect balance of wisdom and pettiness that I really appreciate from Destiny. There's also the great moment in Inferno when Destiny's actually put on the council and Charles and Magneto are like desperately trying to get her off, and they're gonna have the vote, and she's like they know that she's not gonna get voted off, and she can see into the future, and she's like, do you need me to tell you how the vote's gonna go? Do you really want to do the vote?
Yeah,
Because she knows she's not getting off that council.
Destiny is awesome, and it's crazy this character's been gone for so long, and she just fit back in so easily. Like I think that's a testament to Hickman and all the other writers' is talents. That this character has been gone since like what, the 80s. I can fit back so seamlessly into this world.
And I can't recall how exactly Destiny and Mystique originally met. Was it like, I think because it was a work thing in a way, right? Destiny had hired Mystique to help her with her prophecies or deciphering the Destiny books or
Destiny
something.
hired Mystique, who is posing as like a detective, to help her with the future, and then they get bitter because they can't really stop the future. So, and then Mystique ends up giving the Destiny Diaries to Xavier, who knows what he does with them.
Oh, okay, so they're still kind of in play in a way.
I think we saw in one of, I think it was at the end of like the first Inferno, not Destiny, that Moira is reading the Destiny Diaries.
Oh yeah, I do remember that.
So I don't know, they're not as big as they were. I think they were a huge plot point at one point, but they're not like important anymore. They could come up again if a writer's just like, there's more Destiny Diaries we gotta find.
Maybe we'll come back. I mean, it's definitely an interesting concept for sure. Okay, but something else I wanted to ask you about to sort of connect the Jean Grey episode we did with you to this Mystique episode was in that previous episode, you brought up that a big part of Jean Grey's character is sort of rejecting matriarchal destiny, and that has really reframed the way that I read Jean Grey in comics now, and I really enjoy it. I think it makes it more of a rich read, and we have seen a few examples now of Mystique not being a very good maternal figure. Do you think that there's some parallels going on between those two characters in that sense? Because I guess Mystique has actual kids in universe, while Jean's are from a clone and from an alternate timeline stuff. But still, do you think there's anything there about Mystique in a way rejecting matriarchal destiny and a matriarchal path?
That's a good question. I feel like in a way she wants to be a mom. But she just like because of who she is, she just can't do it. Like she's not good at it, but she wants to do it. I feel like. And when Nightcrawler, who comes out looking like her, she throws him off a cliff. So, which is a hilarious panel of her dropping him and him bamfing away, and her being like, "Why? Why?"
By the way, there's a moment in this Brian K. Vaughan series that we read where Mystique is in one of her ideological battles with Forge, and they're going to go save this kid who there's like an Amber Alert out for him. He's a mutant. But Mystique is like, oh, it's so disgusting that a human would like kidnap their own kid, you know? And it's like, hey, Mystique, you cannot be the arbiter of like how to treat your children and like what is like a good parenting when you threw Nightcrawler off a cliff. Like, you know, in the spectrum of parental crimes, like, yeah, okay, kidnapping your own child is bad, but throwing them off a cliff is like gotta be objectively worse. Like that's murder attempt.
When they're an infant, no less.
Not only that, but like the early Claremont stuff, it kind of felt like Mystique was exploiting, you know, Rogue a little bit to get her on the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, just so that on the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants they could have the power force that is Rogue. But really, it was like just weaponizing your mutant child, you know?
Yeah, well, she uses her to a terrible extent against Miss Marvel, or Captain Marvel now. I think she does love Rogue, but she loves what Rogue can do for her more. You know what I mean? And it's interesting that originally Claremont wanted Mystique to be her and Destiny to be Rogue's biological parent, and he was going to have Mystique shift and inseminate Destiny. But again, it was shot down because they didn't want to imply Mystique was anything but a woman, which I think is interesting and that's how I like to read it, that Rogue is their biological child, and that's why she loves Rogue so much, because it's her daughter with Destiny, and Nightcrawler is her son with a man she doesn't like.
Honestly, I think the biological angle does work better too, just because looking at the 3 total children of Mystique, you've got the one she had with Sabretooth, who was not a mutant, and was therefore, she was like, no bueno, I'm not interested in you, go run off and do whatever you want, who cares? And then, you know, an alternate Mystique came along eventually and killed him, I think. But X-Men and their alternate timelines are confusing anyway, so who knows? But, you know, out of the picture. But then there is Nightcrawler, who is her kid, who is a mutant, but like you said, is non-passing as a human mutant and looks similar to her, and there is that intense self-rejection that is going on there that you were talking about. And then we get Rogue, who is a mutant and is the ideal child situation, where she's human passing and she reminds her of Destiny, doesn't remind her of herself in any negative outward way, and she can also exploit and mold her into her little mutant soldier.
Yeah, exactly. Like again, that's why she loves Rogue, is that it is her child, and her child is really powerful, and she can use that. She loves what she can use people for.
It's kind of just this interesting way that I guess, or interesting or toxic or whatever, way that Mystique shows love. And it would be a cool project, I think, to sort of go character by character in the X-Men and sort of see how they conceptually view love and what is their like manifestation of it, because, you know, Mystique's would probably be more on the negative end of the spectrum. Okay, and this is probably a good place to wrap it up. So aside from the Brian K. Vaughan Mystique run that we read today, any other Mystique comics you think that would be, she's kind of hard to pin down, but that would be important or great reads for someone who's interested in the character?
I just started reading the Mike Carey run. Well, not all of it, but the Supernovas arc I just started reading, and that involves Mystique and Rogue drama. So I recommend that. And I guess I'll get to find out why Rogue is in a coma in Messiah Complex. So I recommend that. I also recommend Messiah Complex. I like her in there. Claremont, any Claremont stuff that Mystique is in, I think is great. Obviously, I think that's it. Honestly, I feel like Mystique is a hard character to recommend for because she's everywhere.
Yeah, she will often like pop up in the background as sort of like an ongoing plot thing through like the longevity of issues sometimes, so it does get difficult to recommend specific things. But this is a good start, I think, so thank you very much, Alex. Always a pleasure to have you on. I really enjoyed chatting with you today about Mystique.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
And thank you all for listening, especially if you made it this far. Please be sure to leave a comment below. Let me know if you enjoyed this. Please subscribe if you are at all interested in any other Marvel comic book stuff, any X-Men stuff. I'm a big X-Men fan, obviously. A lot of stuff I do on the channel is Marvel Omnibus reviews and X-Men analysis videos, and then this X-Men podcast, and probably more X-Men stuff to come in the future. So with that, have a great rest of your days, and again, thank you for watching.